Content presented in Cheshire Corners is for educational and informational purposes only. Please consult a legal professional if you have any questions or concerns about the content of this disclaimer, this series, or the legal implications surrounding psychedelic substances in your jurisdiction.
Welcome to Cheshire Corners. My name is Rita Tsaluk, and I will be your host as we trip through the looking glass. Beautiful morning here in Colorado, in Denver, and we have remotely here our guest. That second time is a guest on this channel. Great to see you, Vlad. Vlad is a psychedelic coach. Vlad lives in Europe. Vlad is public educator. Vlad is entrepreneur, and he's our window to the psychedelic era. 10 different ways to keep yourself healthy, correct?
It's 10 pillars of mental health, and it's 3 levels of knowledge that's given there on how people can, in fact, be mentally healthy with behavioral interventions that don't require any pharmaceuticals or psychedelics, for that matter. Thank you for inviting me, Rita. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Very cool.
It's going to be an interesting conversation.
Before we go anywhere, please make sure to like us, subscribe to this channel, find Vlad's information, like and subscribe his channel as well, and let's be part of community and promote this video as much as we can. Thank you, guys. So, Vlad, there's a lot to talk about. We haven't talked for about 6 months, I think. In this 6 months, you start shifting somewhere from psychedelic to wellness. Is that what it is? Or maybe this is a combination of both?
So it's been a while since we last spoke. I got a certification. I'm now a certified psychedelic coach, and I do work with entrepreneurs and top managers, people who usually are under pressure and they have issues with mental health. And what I came to realize during my journey with psychedelics and generally understanding of mental health and the science around it is that it is all connected naturally, right? So whenever people say about the therapeutic potential of psychedelics, first of all, they are talking about addressing various issues that people may have, such as depression, PTSD, anxiety, substance use disorder, anorexia nervosa, etc. But what people don't realize mainly is that what led people to those issues. And if you start looking at a broader picture, you understand that those are the daily life choices people make, such as lack of sleep, malnutrition, absence of movement, and other aspects that are contributing to that state. And especially when we're talking about highly performing individuals like myself, I'm an entrepreneur, and I know what burnout is from my own previous experience. Those people are typically not paying enough attention to themselves, expecting to deliver more, expecting to create more, expecting an eternal drive, and that doesn't happen at all times. You cannot be fully energized if you're not taking care of your basic needs. So during the past 6 months, I had a very holistic thinking around mental health, and I came up with this concept that I basically took as a foundation from the Huberman Lab Podcast, which is widely known in US and abroad. And I started listening to it roughly a year and a half ago, and by now I've listened to about 245 episodes or so from the very beginning. And I mean, it's absolutely wonderful podcast that has a lot of scientific information available free of charge for anyone who is willing to self-educate and have the discipline to listen to a 2 or 3 hour long podcast, and which I have. So after gathering all this information, I took what he offered as a foundation and then built on top of it. So the system that I developed is standing on the shoulders of giants, as they say. So the system is called 10 Pillars of Mental Health. And this is the holistic approach, in my view, of how people should treat mental health. Because usually, again, when things become hard, when people realize that they do have an issue, they typically look at the symptoms rather than the reasons. And number one being the most critical one is sleep. So you need to sleep consistently from 7 to 9 hours each and every night, and going back to sleep and waking up at the same time with maximum deviation of 30 minutes, even on weekends. If you start to ask questions around how people are sleeping, and this is probably the most asked question that I, say out loud whenever I meet people, how you sleep. And typically people say it's good sleep, 6 hours. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's interesting. But if you look at the science, there is only 1% of the entire population that can indeed sleep for 6 hours and be fully recovered. So it's either my selection is totally biased and, I'm just meeting all those people from that 1%, or people simply don't recognize the value and the need for sleep. Because just to give you a very basic example, if you've slept for 6 hours and then you decide to drive a car, it is as if you're driving while being drunk. So people need to sleep from 7 to 9 hours every night. It has to be consistent, waking up, going back to sleep at the same time. I'm not going to go into details, but this is just a very tiny portion of the entire structure that is called mental health. And you cannot say that, I'm depressed because something happened. Yeah, surely, maybe. But how's your sleep? What are you eating? And the rest. Because again, if those elements are not taken care of, a person can be in a permanent state of burnout without even recognizing it. And that would eventually lead to serious consequences. So if we take a step back and talk about what is the place of psychedelics in the whole field of mental health, the way I see it is that psychedelics can help people get a new perspective on existing information, potentially help them reevaluate life choices, maybe heal trauma that was sitting in there and causing destructive behaviors. But then again, once psychedelic experience is finished, it's, Monday, it's Tuesday, it's Wednesday, and it's up to a person to implement those changes in life. And the change has to stick in order to provide the result. Unfortunately, this is not a magic pill. It requires a certain amount of discipline, but there are myths. People say that, I'm not disciplined enough. I don't have energy. I don't have time. It's so hard. I'm lazy, etc. And those are simply excuses. Unless a person really wants to change something, they can find a way, but there are scientifically proven ways on how to easily implement those changes, and one of them would be to start small. Not starting to read 50 pages a day, just start with 1 page a day. Small steps. Then once that new neurological pathway starts to build, and then you cement it, and then it becomes a habit, but it takes time.
Not sleeping enough, it's important. What can you do if you don't sleep?
Well, there are ways, there are protocols. There's one beautiful tool created by the Huberman Lab called non-sleep deep rest, which is roughly a 20-minute protocol. It is a self-guided meditation, and it is extremely helpful at falling asleep and recovering lost sleep. So yeah, I even created a version in Russian.
I only had one method before. I would count lamps, right? And then I would count them until 2 or 2:30.
That doesn't work, unfortunately. No. There is a beautiful book by Matthew Walker called Why We Sleep. Highly recommend to read. It's just a masterpiece. It gives you a deep understanding of how sleep works in our body, why we need it, and that methods like this, they don't work. There is another method that you can try, is imagining in your mind, if you're struggling to fall asleep, a specific route that you remember going through, and try to remember each and every step in very details, like how are you going through it, and that would just help your mind to go back to sleep. The thing with the sleep is that if you haven't slept enough, you won't be able to recover it the next night. It takes longer. And this is like one of the myths that, if I don't sleep for like 5 days in a row, I can catch up on weekend. No, you're just going to mess up your entire circadian rhythms that govern your wakefulness. So better not. And if you're feeling sleepy, you can have a nap during daytime. Just don't overdo it, like limit it to 1 hour or so, and then try to wait till the regular time when you're going to sleep, even though you're feeling sleepy, and you just need to hold on, and that will help you regulate your circadian rhythms as well, and as well as morning light and the sunset light as well.
Well, a lot to unwrap, a lot. Okay, so let's figure out first. Are we talking about physical health or mental health? And what comes first, chicken or egg?
Amazing question. In my view, it should be a holistic approach. You cannot say that our brain is separate from our body and vice versa. We are a human being that have, typically hands, legs, nose, ears, brain, etc. So it is intertwined. The second is nutrition. So this is about eating healthy 20 to 30 different types of fruits and vegetables every week, and minimizing ultra-processed food, as well as excess of sugar and consumption of alcohol, ideally, because there is no safe dose of alcohol. 90% of serotonin receptors are located in our gut, for example. And there is this word called microbiome, which is widely used all over the place. And the funny fact about the microbiome is that if you take number of human cells and you compare to the number of microbes in and on our body, on our skin as well, the ratio would be 1 to 1.3. So technically, we're half human. We're not entirely human. But I'm saying this to highlight the fact that the microbiome itself causes specific changes in our brain chemistry. And depending on what we eat, depending on how we sleep, depending on whether or not we exercise and attend to our basic needs. Third is movement, and movement is critical and fundamental. We as species been moving our entire life throughout the evolution process. So ideally 150 minutes of cardio each week, not in one go, 2 strength trainings or 3, and the further you go, the more movement you need. The fourth one is stress management. We cannot get rid of stress. It's just not possible. Stress is gonna be in our life, but we can handle stress by various tools, such as breathing. The more extended your breath out, the more relaxed your system becomes. So think of breathing, think of meditation techniques and other stuff. That all affects our mind. So we may think that, there are no issues. I didn't have a mental trauma. I didn't have any adverse events in my childhood. Why am I depressed? Why am I burned out? Why am I feeling this anxiety? And then you start to ask around the typical daily behavior, and you realize that person is either, again, not sleeping, or maybe eating an ultra-processed food all the time, or, tons of sugar, and sugar in excessive amounts is toxic for our neurons. And of course, it can spark inflammation. And this is where it is all intertwined. So instead of looking for one particular reason, we should be looking at a whole set of elements that can lead to a negative outcomes for our mental health. So I'm a strong believer that the majority of reasons are deeply rooted in our daily habits, basically. And as a person with an autoimmune disease, which is quite rare, it's roughly 1% of the population, it's called ankylosing spondylitis. It's a variation of arthritis. I know that my autoimmune disease is sparked whenever there is an inflammation in my body. So it also affects the physical level, but it affects the mental level as well. And that's why it is critical to attend to our basic needs in order to be able to just, be mentally stable and, perform to the extent that we'd love to.
But hold on, I'm not sleeping because I have high anxiety. But I have high anxiety because I'm not sleeping enough. So isn't it looks like circles that needs to be just broken at some point and just wake up? We need to be woken up, or is it something that we're going to? What can break this circle? What can it shake us and get us to the point that we're gonna get better balance of health and mental health, physical health and mental health, and things would just start working again like a clock, right? Like the whole health is a balance of whatever micro things we have in our gut, whatever is happiness we have in our life, whatever is that maybe making us create more serotonin, or maybe we're creating more serotonin to have happiness. Either way, it's a balance, right? So we are getting once in a while of balance. And those high-performing people that trying to overachieve, getting out of balance more often. So how we can get back in balance?
I'd start with an intent and desire. And typically, whenever we're talking about the change that happens in human life, it is something that is closely related to health. So I recently played with an AI with Perplexity and asked to find reasons why people change, what leads them to change their lifestyle, or try to be healthy, etc. And the reasons were quite basic but interesting at the same time. The first was the problem with health. So, for example, it could be some serious illness. It could be maybe something very critical that makes people reevaluate their entire health. The fifth is the social connections, and we are social animals, so we need others to be mentally healthy. We need the support of other humans, other individuals, and ideally in a 3D real world interaction. It could be related with the health of a close relative or a friend. So whenever a person sees somebody struggling, they're like, probably looking at themselves at this moment and thinking, oh, maybe I should take care of my health as well. And I remember a conversation that I had with a friend of mine a few months ago that just randomly appeared in my mind, is that she mentioned that she had a conversation with a friend who got lung cancer, and that motivated her to quit smoking. So this is just an illustration of that particular direction. But again, generally, it all starts with the intention. Like, do I want to change something in life? And well, of course, why do I want to change it? If that is in the place, the rest is just mechanics, basically, right? You need to figure out what to do next. But then again, as you said, it's a vicious cycle, and you feel anxiety because you don't sleep. You don't sleep because vice versa. But the sixth one is light and darkness. It governs our circadian rhythms, and we need it whenever we're waking up, and we need to have darkness when we're falling asleep. So it's critical that there is no light when we're going to sleep. Not only this, but the seventh one is agency. This is about the sense of agency. It's not that our life does something to us. It's that we are in charge of ourselves, our life choices, and the way we want to live our life, whether it's healthy or not. You start small. You start with something where you can have agency over. It could be anything, just a general line of thinking of identifying yourself as a person who is willing to be more healthy, to live a more healthy lifestyle, etc. It all starts here in our mind. We need to have the intention, and we need to shift the narrative that we have internally. The next one is purpose, is understanding the meaning and what is your particular meaning in life. For me, it is helping people change, and for others it could be something totally different, but it is critical to recognize and understand it. The most interesting thing is that it sits inside of us all. We just need to unearth it. The ninth one is the rest, and we all need rest, and that is very variable aspect. For some people it could be reading a nice book. For some it could be just nice chill without any devices, or sitting and looking at the ceiling. For some people it could be a nice walk in the park or a vacation. And then the 10th and the final one is curiosity, and this is the sense of novelty, and this is the childlike state of being interested in the things that surround us and being submerged into the new knowledge and being curious about new information, about new technologies, about new ideas, and generally how the way works. So this is the entire system that can guarantee that a person can be mentally healthy with no pharmaceuticals and with no psychedelics. And those are sleep, nutrition, movement, stress management, social connections. Then it's light and darkness, sense of agency, purpose, rest, and finally curiosity.
For me, what helps is I'm creating for myself some kind of stories and beliefs that helps me to lead towards more healthy lifestyle. So, for example, I do believe, I know you don't, but I do believe that there is a DMT in my body at night. Every single day I'm sleeping and DMT is getting released, and I'm communicating with something I don't know about, and I'm okay to do not know about this because that's what brings my curiosity. I'm trying very hard to figure things out, and this is creates pleasure for me. I'm really enjoying this curiosity and answers. When you asked me a question before, why am I doing all this channel, Almadelic, and everything else? Because I'm just curious. I'm curious to death. What's on another side? What's there? What is it all about? So if I don't sleep enough, I don't have enough DMT. Maybe somebody's sending me a signal or something, and I'm not receiving the signal, or maybe I cannot send my signal out. I want to make changes to the universe and didn't get sleep that day. And bacteria in my gut, I know that if I'm consuming kombucha or fermented food, it creates good bacteria in my gut that maybe will create more serotonin, that maybe will let me to interact with the universe better. Let's do that. And if I'm going to hike, or if I'm going to exercise, if I'm taking it for some time, then I'm creating again that serotonin that will let me to communicate with universe, communicate with myself, and maybe just see, I wouldn't say different reality, but slightly more interesting and different, because I think there's something about it, and there's something that I don't see. And I'm really, really curious to open that door and figure out what is there. So that's my motivation to have healthy life. Not necessarily living long, which is nothing wrong with that. Not necessarily living healthy, which is exactly what it is. In my mind, living healthy is ability to support myself to be curious and functional. So that's how I motivate myself.
That's brilliant motivation. And this is the 10th pillar of my system, which is curiosity. And it is critical indeed for the longevity piece, because if you're curious, if you want to learn as much as possible, if everything you find exciting and new, you have the will to live, basically, right? And what happens when people lack the curiosity, especially when people come of age, and they lose this meaning, they lose this spark of curiosity, and they just prepare themselves to death. They're just sitting there and they're, it's not that good. It's how many years have I got on this planet and stuff like that. But if they are curious, usually, they live longer. And if you look again at the psychedelic community and the scientific community around psychedelics, is that people typically live quite long enough. And this is one of the reasons, in my view, is that psychedelics, they foster this curiosity, this childlike state that, we all humans have, but we tend to lose at a certain age. And then psychedelics can help us bring that back and experience the interest, the excitement of the novelty of the world and the experiences and the information and the knowledges and connections. So this is absolutely amazing. And again, DMT in your brain, DMT is in all our brains. It's created endogenously, and we don't yet know how and when, under which circumstances it's being secreted, but it could potentially affect the way we think, the way we communicate. And there's so much we don't know about ourselves, even though with all the technology that we have at our disposal, even if we think that, we can see it all, but it's just a very narrow piece of the entire spectrum. And we think ignorantly enough that, we understand it all. We got it all figured because we trust the level of advancement of the tools that we have. But in reality, it's just work in progress. So yeah, there are a lot of things that are to be uncovered today, tomorrow, and in the future. And as long as you stay curious, you're there for a long ride.
And for those of you who are still bored of life and not finding this life is full of curious, beautiful things, there's two things that we can secretly let you know. One of them is AI, and another one is psychedelics. Just read about those two things, and if you're not gonna get extremely excited and curious, listen about it and play with it. And oh my God, there's so much to do. 6 months ago, all you wanted to talk about is psychedelics. Right now, you want to talk about wellness more than you want to talk about psychedelics. What happened?
Yeah, true. Well, first and foremost, I still want to talk about psychedelics, and that's what I do. I still keep on educating people on several platforms, on YouTube and Telegram and TikTok and even LinkedIn, which is very unorthodox platform where you could spark a conversation around such stigmatized topic. So I still do that, but I've been, first of all, talking about psychedelics in the context of mental health. So originally when I started my public education efforts and the blogging and itself around the psychedelics, it was specifically dedicated to the therapeutic potential. And when it comes to the therapeutic potential, it is by default means that, we're talking about mental health related issues. And of course, if you're talking about mental health as a topic, it is significantly wider than psychedelics and application of psychedelics within mental health, at least right now at the moment of recording of this podcast, even though FDA in USA didn't approve the application of MDMA assisted therapy. There are significant changes that are nevertheless happening. And here in Europe, there are grassroots movements like Psychedelic Care, which is an initiative of EU citizens designed to bring to Euro Parliament the concept of introduction of psychedelics into the medical system. So those things are still happening. But then again, each and every one of those topics and directions, they're sitting within the wider field of mental health. And I guess the most influential aspect to me was the knowledge that I've acquired around the neurobiology from listening to the Huberman Lab. And I guess it's roughly 600 or 650 hours of lectures of, leading doctors and MDs and whatnot about the latest data and latest knowledge. And again, when you think about mental health and you start to connect it with psychedelics, there are so many ways in how you can approach it. And one of the ways is integration. And this is a concept that is extremely unknown. Let's put it this way. It's insufficiently known to wider audiences. And I've noticed it at some point that when you speak about integration with somebody who is, in the psychedelic community, they tend to understand the necessity, the need, and why it is important in the first place. But when you convey the message about integration outside of psychedelic community, people typically are puzzled because they don't know what the hell is integration. And integration is the most important part because, again, when people have the psychedelic experience with the intention to heal, and again, it's not bad to, I guess, consume it if it's safe for you recreationally, but just make sure that you don't have a genetic predisposition for bipolar disease or schizophrenia, because it can spark such disease potentially, not necessarily. But again, if it's done with the healing intention, done properly with all the safety precautions, it is an experience that helps people reevaluate their life at times, or see the inconvenient truth they've been hiding from themselves. The deeper layers of their psyche, they just raise up, and then people get to see what was sitting in there and causing all this suffering, all the pain, all the discomfort, and all potentially self-destructive behaviors. But then the insight itself, however critical and important it is for a person to realize, means completely nothing if person doesn't act on it. And of course, there are very important rules when it comes to psychedelics, such as never to make any dramatic changes on the next day or the following day. If you think there's a interesting or wonderful idea and you gotta figure it out, just write it down and put it somewhere and let it stay there for a month. If in a month you still think it's a good idea, then act on it. But when it comes to health interventions, this is something that you can do right away. And typically what happens, well, not all times, but sometimes people, after having a psychedelic experience, they quit drinking, they quit smoking, and one of the reasons is that they recognize that it was the pain that was sitting inside of them causing all this to basically indulge in self-destruction. And this is where integration comes in, because once the psyche is kind of thrown into pieces, you then need to put it back together, sew it together as a blanket of different elements, and then create your own narrative. And this is where the critical window opens that allows you to rewire the brain, literally, to change the old patterns, to rewire the existing neural connections and circuits, and then create a new one, the one that you desire, to build a new narrative, to change the self-belittling talk towards something more strongly positive, something that you want to be there, such as I'm a person who is living a healthy life. And those are the foundations that can support the transformation process in the long run. Because again, if the person doesn't want to leave, what's the point of eating healthy or sleeping appropriately if the entire behavior is self-destructive? First, you need to fix the mindset, and once it's done, then you can start implementing the change. And integration is a process that can last quite long. Depending on the case, it could last for years, but with the proper support and the proper approach, of course, it's shorter. What people should realize is that it requires effort, it requires intention, and yes, it is outside of the comfort zone, because again, our brain doesn't want us to invent the bicycle each and every time. That's why we live on autopilot, and the majority of our life, roughly 70% of our daily decisions, are based on our existing neural circuits, and we do them in an autopilot mode because our brain is trying to save the energy. It consumes more than 20% of the energy of the entire body, and it doesn't want us to, consume more. That's why it's basically safeguarding us from implementing this change. And this is where the conflict kicks in, because the brain doesn't want to change, but then you want to change. And this is something that would potentially be a problem if a person doesn't have the necessary tools or the knowledge or the skills or the support system or basic resources such as energy levels or the ability to, do whatever is necessary to do. And again, we're going back to the basics. If a person doesn't sleep properly, where would this energy come from? It's so easy, yet it's so important. And the majority of people, they just don't recognize that once you start fixing the foundation of your basic physiological needs, and while understanding the neurobiology that sits underneath, the conversation around mental health is just a speculation. You cannot be mentally healthy if the basics are not covered. And I guess in answer to your question, for me, always at all times, as many years as I remember, I had this strange insight, and I probably already mentioned it, but nevertheless, I'm going to go and repeat it again. It doesn't matter what is the level of insight that you have in psychedelic experience. What matters is what you do with it on Monday.
So, Cheshire Corners is a channel when we're looking at the world through psychedelic lenses. And when we're looking at the health from psychedelic lenses, we kind of breaking the status quo in a lot of things. That's why this is so interesting to look at the health through psychedelic lenses. And for example, just like you mentioned, psychedelic experience you can kind of divide on 3 stages. At least that's what our Colorado regulators saying for facilitate the program, which is preparation, which is set and setting, then experience, the session, and integration. And then looking back to all our life, I think all the important and even not important things should be processed in that way. Simple things. I'm going hiking. What am I going to think of preparation? I'm going to, of course, know what I'm going to wear. I'm set and setting, right? I know where I'm going to go. I know that how weather's going to be there. I know that I would need to look around and see how pretty it is inside. But also when I have this experience, I want to integrate it back and also just say, oh my God, the sky just was limitless. And oh my God, this view was priceless. And oh my God, everything I've done and I ever worked on, if there is a price for any of it, this priceless walk, you just can't, you can't quantify it with the money and so much energy I'm getting from it. So this is just a simple walk, but you're going through all these 3 stages. Maybe you're not going up quick. Maybe you're not writing it down. Maybe you don't keep a journal. But how important to integrate everything in our life, how important it is to have a certain settings. And there's things in our lives that already have certain settings. We just didn't think about it. For example, simple institute of marriage, right? People going and having a wedding. It's a ceremony. And they set themselves for having lengthy and committed and loving relationship. And then every time they have anniversaries, there's a way to integrate what they learned so far. And this is just one of those examples. What about our jobs, our business ventures, our friendships? We should take these things as something that we always need to process. And this is just one of those. Psychedelics. We didn't think of it as a certain settings, experience and integration, but the whole our life is. I don't know. I'm finding it so amazing, and it, kind of like a view from the side. You always have certain views on certain things, and then suddenly with psychedelics, you just, oh, that's what it means. Like pictures of Salvador Dali. You're looking at, somebody see nude woman and somebody see President Lincoln. You just suddenly start seeing things that you haven't seen before. And I think this is just so cool to think of health from the perspective of psychedelics, with everything we learned so far.
True. And this is just to build on top of what you said, and you've had really great examples, and I love them. This integration is critical in our daily life, not just within the context of psychedelics. I fully agree. There are a couple of elements that I wanted to add on top, and one of them is the practice of journaling, and there's this other practice which I've learned roughly a couple of years ago, which is recognition of emotions. And this is, well, yeah, there's a third element, the tracking. So if I forget, please remind me. So the first one, the journaling is, again, this is the third piece of integration. So whenever experience happened, and then whenever you write it, whenever you maybe do a voice memo, or just consciously put effort towards making sense, a narrative type of sense of the things that happen, this is part of integration basically in life, not necessarily only with psychedelics. Again, in your example, you went to ski or for a walk, and then you sit in the new journal and then write it down, like what were the thoughts, what were you going through, what were emotions that were running through your mind, and what you observed, what were there people, birds, whatever. This is helping us integrate all those experiences in the deeper layers of our psyche. The second element that I wanted to highlight is the need to keep track of emotions. This is something that is, well, to me, is more of a habit. I love this app. It is 100% free. It is developed by professors and doctors in Stanford. It's called How We Feel. Basically, this is an emotion diary, and it has a big variety of various types of emotions, depending on the valence, depending whether or not it's positive or negative. You pick an emotion, and then you make inputs like where you are, what are you doing, and if you're alone or not with somebody. And then you can make pictures, then you can make voice memos, and it has AI as well, so that it can help you process stuff. But the beauty of this particular app, and well, they're not paying me, I'm just endorsing them. I want to spread the word further, because this is an incredibly powerful tool to not only start recognizing and naming our emotions, but to be in touch with our emotions. And after probably 2.5 years of diligently doing those check-ins 2 or 3 times a day, I now have the backlog and the statistics and the necessary information about the type of the emotions that I'm going through, and whether or not it's a trend, or, am I in a good place? And it generally helps me to be more emotionally intelligent about the particular emotions that I'm experiencing in the moment. Even if it's a very negatively charged situation, I can distinguish several emotions that I'm experiencing and name them. And just by the fact of naming them, that gives me agency over my reaction. So I don't react because I'm pissed or stressed, or I don't know, whatever. I'm choosing a reaction based on my conscious awareness, and the exercise itself is highly critical to increase that level of awareness and understanding of ourselves. So the third aspect is tracking, and this is not only related to this particular app that I mentioned before, but generally it's more about consistency. Whenever you're trying to implement something, whether it's better sleep or better habits at eating or whatever, in order to make sure that you are indeed implementing, the critical aspect is tracking. There is this phrase in the corporate world: what's measured gets changed. if I remember correctly. I may be wrong here. But yeah, probably there are going to be people who will put it out in the comments and point the correct phrase. But nevertheless, the point here, as long as you're not tracking it, you cannot really change it. And this all comes from the change theory developed by Cotter and others. But generally speaking, if you want to change something, you first need to understand the baseline, what's happening right now. So for example, if you want to change your habits when it comes to sleep, do you know how much you sleep on a daily basis for 7 out of 7 nights in a row? If you don't, what are you going to change, right? And then you start to implement small incremental changes. And then again, with tracking, you know that this or that doesn't help. So again, I have another app that is helping me to track my sleep. And I've been using, or actually not using, but consuming rather, psychedelic substances throughout my life. And unfortunately, not throughout in my entire life, I had this powerful tracking tool that I was able to implement. But now I know which of the substances have positive or negative effect on my sleep, for example. And this is just beautiful information. I'm just, again, highlighting the need for tracking, which is highly critical whenever somebody is planning to introduce a change in their life. So yeah, again, going back to your original thought, integration, it is all about human life experience, not necessarily only a psychedelic experience.
Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, put comments under this video, and go to the details and find information about Vlad and his systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's good.
Now he needs a lot of glue. Lots
Thanks,
of glue.
Jonathan.
And